Position today. This computer. All right, well, whatever. Hi, friends. Sorry, this computer is in vertical mode because we're using a
Do you want to tilt it down more?
telephone. No, it's fine. So we'll be watching in horizontal mode or vertical mode.
Yeah,
Well,
we can handle
whatever.
this.
Move this damn camera down. Hi, welcome. Sorry about the uncomfortable position of vertical phone positioning. I have an iPhone number 13 that I use for this, and
Well, we're just new. We're new to the whole live on the YouTube.
that's all right. I smashed your face. Hi, welcome, guys. Dinosaur Omelet. I'm Chris, and this is
I'm Angela.
Angela, wife, and we're Dinosaur Omelet people. Welcome in. So we're talking about heritage chicken versus the commercial breed, yes? Which is important to a lot of you guys if you're homesteaders. Why?
Well,
What's
because
the goal?
you want to be self-sufficient as much as possible. You want to have healthy foods that you know isn't filled with chemicals or hormones or antibiotics, that sort of thing. Yeah, and you want to be able to produce your own meat, produce your own eggs, and have options.
Yeah, right. And, before I even get started, I'm not like, there's this misconception, I think, that heritage breeds are the best. And the commercial chickens are not like, they're somehow inferior or not as desirable. This is not true. There's differences, and each one has a purpose and a use at your homestead. Okay, and so we're going to go over this. It's not very complicated. It will not be a very long video because this is pretty simple stuff, but I have good information that I would like everybody to learn. Would you have anything to say? Why don't we talk about what a heritage chicken is, first of all? So there's heritage, and then there's commercial. And there's another thing called hybrids, what I'm not really talk about, but which are just interbred heritage chickens, really. But there's heritage chickens that you're going to deal with when you're ordering your birds, and the more commercial chicken.
Is it okay if I talk about the heritage?
Yes. Jibber jabber on.
So, heritage chickens, they are your older breeds. Pretty much they're breeds of chickens that have been bred generationally to have a certain size of meat or produce a certain amount of eggs. But they're chickens that typical like homesteaders or small farms or farms, especially back in the day, but very important now too, where we didn't have these quick growing birds, chickens. You'd have a breed that you knew it was going to take maybe 5 to 7 months, depending on the breed, to grow out to meat ready weight, or you knew it was going to be laying a certain amount of eggs. It is reliable, it is predictable, but it's a natural. Everything about it is natural. It's been bred to have expectations.
Yeah, the heritage chicken, just like it sounds, there's a heritage to it. These are older lines of birds. They've been around for a while, and there are, like with your breeding, standards of perfection. There's standards that the heritage breeds are held to, and there's a lot of pros, like positives, to raising heritage chickens on your homestead. In a factory, not so much, okay? Yeah. Factory farms versus homesteads. We try to duplicate a lot of stuff we see at the industrial level, but we want to duplicate it on a small scale. This is not one of those things you want to do at home. You don't want to imitate a commercial venture with poultry at a small scale homestead. And I'll try to make that make sense as to why. So why not? Why not? So the commercial facilities, right? They're not home. They're running through chickens like a faucet. They're getting chickens, they grow quick, they die quick, they use them up quick. They're laying eggs or they're growing meat and then out the door. Heritage chickens, your home chickens, your pet chickens, they live longer. And we're going to talk about the pros of heritage chickens. Okay, they have the longer lifespan. Okay, there's genetic diversity in the animals. All right, and they're reliable. Yes.
Yeah, and
reliable with their production and their output and their growth.
Yeah, and physically they're sturdy, so they shouldn't have any kind of like structural issues. Their muscles.
And a big one. You can reproduce them.
Yeah, you can reproduce them. You can have a rooster and a hen. They'll lay eggs, and many of the heritage breeds they tend to go broody at least for a brief period of time. Some breeds are different, but
If you're new to chickens, tell them.
you can pick broodiness is when the mother hen wants to sit on her eggs and incubate them to hatch chicks.
Right.
And heritage breeds, typically, most of them will have some broodiness in them. Some of them are take longer, like they'll sit longer than others, and some of them that have been focused on egg production, it's kind of not so much in them, but you can reproduce your own.
Mark's dropping in. Hi, Mark. Sorry for the vertical video today.
Oh, yeah.
So what would you call a leghorn chicken?
A leghorn.
They're heritage. So I was looking
Yeah.
into it. They're used commercially because they're great egg production birds,
Yeah.
but they're a heritage breed. They have a long lineage. They're used in commercial facilities because they're high production.
Mm-hmm. And specifically for the eggs because they're a smaller
Yeah, they're egg
body.
birds. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like, even if it was a commercial bird, if it's something that you can raise at home and use as a reproductive organism that you can breed and that has reliable genetic diversity within breeding, the word heritage to me is just, I get it, right? It makes sense. Oh, it's a long bloodline of birds and a history to it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a culture in homesteading, right? Everybody wants to be of the earth and traditional, which is great. But there are commercial breeds that homesteaders often opt for, like the Cornish cross. They grow almost instantaneously and you have a ton of meat.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be breeding them and they're going to die young. And, so let me talk about actually.
Well, just one thing on the
Sorry.
leghorn. The leghorn and some of when they're commercially bred and reproduced the way they are, okay, so if you're getting birds from a quality breeder, let's go with that, then that breeder is going to be sticking to the standard of perfection for that breed. And leghorns, they're more specific for producing their eggs. They're not really broody birds. They don't really sit as much, but that may be a quality a breeder can manage in the bird so that there's a little bit of broodiness. If you're getting birds that are meant specifically for commercial, or if you're getting them from hatchery stock, then they're not going to be focusing so much on the true characteristics of the breed, and they can end up breeding out that whole breed.
Yeah, and heritage owners will selectively breed traits out of an animal that
Yeah.
might be dominant, like an aggressive rooster, like this breed of chicken, perhaps, whatever, X breed of chicken, their roosters are always nasty. Well, not necessarily. Breeders do select to take that trait out of the roosters. But it's time consuming, obviously. You're spending time breeding the animal for its disposition. So it may take a few generations, which is, it could be years, right?
It could be. It just depends on the genetic makeup of the birds you have that you're working with. If there's recessive traits in there, it can, anyway, it's definitely doable. I'd say that.
All right. So pros of the heritage chickens: the genetic diversity, the self-sufficient aspect of reproduction. There's standards to them, and what else? The resilience, their health. They're not susceptible. They're not going to be dying. They're not going to have the health problems that a lot of the commercial birds have as they get older, and their production remains high over time. Whereas with commercial birds, it's not so much. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Cons of the heritage chickens. So heritage breeds take time. All right. And they're not going to have some of the magnificent aspects of the commercial birds, like the huge meat production. But what you're trading out, getting from the heritage bird, is their health, their longer lifespan, and a continual source of chickens because you can keep breeding them. Whereas with some of those big meat production birds, they grow and then they become meat. That's what they're designed to do.
Yeah.
Okay, like I said earlier with Cornish cross.
And there are some people who they may have gotten one, a Cornish cross, and they didn't know it was a meat chicken, because some people, get them from Tractor Supply, and then they're like, well, I'm determined to keep this bird as a pet. It's just not going to live very many years. They're natural, it's been bred into them to consume food to put on that weight. So then you're trying to work around what they were genetically bred to do with the food eating, and you have to limit what they're eating and be very intentional. So it's interesting because then you're going against what they're designed to keep them living longer. But that was not really the point.
No, that was a good point. Okay, so I'm moving on to the commercial chickens. Commercial chickens. So there's two things I want to talk about with commercial birds. The application at the homestead and their application in big agribusiness, like the huge poultry farms. Commercial chickens can be used and are frequently used at home. You can order, oh sorry,
It's okay.
beating the wife here. Order commercial birds and raise them on the farm. But again, you do have that kind of, a lot with them is the one and done. They're going to gain their size, produce their meat, which is great because they produce a lot of meat in a short span of time. Kind of like turkeys. You order turkeys, they're big, and then you slaughter them, like with some of these meat birds. I don't think in a homestead situation you're going to be ordering commercial egg layers because their egg laying is high, but you can get comparably high results from heritage breeds. But the egg output of the commercial breeds is usually shorter lifespan.
Yeah, and people do. I think it's the Isla Brown is what they're called, and that one is it's Isa. Yeah,
Isa, yeah.
They're sweet birds. They're high egg producers, like the leghorns, and they're usually used for commercial. But people in farms, they do like to get them because of the production and such. But then their production just ends, like dramatically decreases at 2 years old. So. And it's not a breed that you can actually like. I don't believe you can reproduce it yourself. It's one of those crosses. Yeah. But just some people do
if you are crossing, so I was looking into breeding. What do you call them? Cornish crosses myself. So that's a bit of work. You really need to know what you're doing and have the appropriate animals. You can't just buy. I forget what the Cornish birds and God, I forget. I had my notes here, but. It's a challenge. I mean, you can do it. People do it, but it's more of a challenge, and you got to be more cautious with what you're pairing and where you're getting your breeding stock.
And just one more thing about the getting commercial breeds for eggs on a homestead. So generally, like what we like to talk about is being more self-sufficient. So that's why we're fans of. Well, there's different purposes in having like the commercial meat chickens versus the heritage chickens, but we're a big fan of being able to reproduce your animals, keep your system going, and so people who get commercial egg layers, then they're aware they're gonna likely replace them really soon, and that's just kind of not like what we focus on. We focus on being more self-sufficient.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about in the beginning of this with the homestead culture. There's a culture in that whole homestead community, which is that self-sufficiency, reproduction, disconnection from, the grid, whatever you want to call it, like modernity to a degree, to where you want to have your own production capacity and be able to reproduce at home. That's a big homestead mentality or a small farm, whatever you want to call it, farmette. Whatever name you choose, it doesn't really matter. The point is that you have a goal and you have this ideal that you have at your facility. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, the goal is a big issue, with the chicken breed you're raising, how many you're going to have, and are you raising for meat or eggs? Why? What are you satisfying with that? Are you keeping them as pets? Is it something too for the family? So there's a lot of things to consider. And the different heritage breeds, the other good thing about the heritage breeds is you have variety in the application of these birds.
And you know what to expect. If you're getting them from good breeders that are sticking to the standard of perfection for the breed, you know what to expect of that breed of bird. As far as weights, how much weight the hen or rooster is going to put on throughout its length of growth period, or when to expect it to start laying eggs, because some breeds, they'll start laying eggs as early as 5 months old, like the black Australorps, and other breeds that are slower growing and they're larger birds, they might take 7 months old, or maybe the more fancy breeds like silkies, they'll take 7 months. So there's specific things that you can expect from these heritage breeds because there's lots of history.
Right. She raises silkies, so she has a silky program.
And then also the black Australorp for meat and eggs.
Yeah, but you raise the silkies for their temperament. And their color and their form. So you want to it's a lot of stuff to manage. It's not just hatching and see what happens. So she's specifically raising them for pets. They serve as pets. They lay eggs.
Yeah, they're pets.
But they're definitely not something you're going to rely on to feed the family and have a lot of meat from. But they're definitely good. And this is just not just her silkie. Silkies in general, that's a great bird to have to hatch eggs. If you
So
guys
for the
don't
mothers to
know,
hatch
if you're new to chickens, silkie chickens go broody, which means they're going to sit on eggs very efficiently. And they're pretty dedicated to hatching eggs. Didn't you hatch ducks?
I did.
Muscovies, you hatched the Muscovy
Yeah,
ducks.
I had 3 duck eggs under a silkie.
You had to spray them with water, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Keep them wet. So the silkies are good for that. But each heritage breed has its benefits and maybe a drawback. But you look into them and see what your needs are.
And in case you were wondering, I did do a lot of research on heritage breeds concerning eggs and meat. And with the homesteader mentality, we wanted it to serve both purposes, not just one. So there are different breeds, but we were wanting it to be efficient in growth rate. So we wanted something that would mature quicker, but also start laying eggs quicker as well, but be known for laying a good amount of eggs, not just like a small amount. With a great temperament, family-friendly birds that can also go broody and hatch their own eggs. And all that is the black Australorp. And they're very good with foraging. So they're
docile.
Yeah, they're awesome. It's an awesome breed for homesteading. There are lots of great breeds, but that one
that's one we
can't
chose.
say anything good about or enough about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, I'm going to go with some cool facts and give you guys some education about some stuff here. But in conclusion about these two things, I don't want anybody thinking like a commercial breed. Oh, I shouldn't raise a commercial breed because I want to keep my traditional homestead. What are you talking about? You know, you go buy a dozen Cornish cross chickens and you're producing meat like you had 50 birds. Like they produce a lot of meat. They are a commercial, breed, but they satisfy that meat production and you'll fill up a freezer pretty quick. There's drawbacks to them. Not just the fact that you're not going to be reproducing them, but, they're dirty. They produce a lot of filth. They take up a lot of space, but they're very efficient and they grow very quick, like 6 to 8 weeks?
Yeah,
8 weeks or so.
Yep.
Which brings me into some cool facts about chicken growth. So the commercial places like Tyson Foods, Purdue, what's the other one? I forget. It's just out of my head because I've been talking so much. So the birds they use, they're broiler chickens. They grow very, very quickly. And through their breeding programs and their genetic, they didn't do like GMO. It's not in the lab where they're manipulating the genes, but through selective breeding, they got these chickens from growing, it took 12 to 14 weeks about 30 years ago to get these chickens to slaughter size, and now it's about 5 to 7 weeks. So it cut that time in half. And it wasn't just the breeding, it's the food efficiency and how well they convert feed into meat now. So that's really something else. So these huge poultry production facilities are churning out, millions, actually billions of these birds. I think 30 billion in the United States. It's an insane number of chickens are raised and slaughtered out in this short amount of time, which has a million issues with it, which I'll talk about in a second. Not pro or con, just facts of nature. So real quick, the two most common birds in these poultry places, and this is cool information, the Cobb 500 and I think the Ross 308. So these two are, they're broiler birds. Now the Cobb 500 it's a meat bird, but it's owned by a subsidiary of Tyson Foods. So Tyson has another company, it's Van Tress, I think. Let me see if I have notes here. Cobb Van Tress. And that company owns the genetic line of this bird. So it's like, you ever hear the scary story of Monsanto seeds spreading and then you got to pay for it? It's kind of like that. They own the genetic line of this bird. So if you're buying them, you're buying them from them or maybe a distributor. Because you can buy these creatures from distributors. But they're the two most, if you're eating a chicken in the United States, you're eating one of them. Unless you're raising it yourself. Okay? It's interesting stuff. But these birds, of course, are raised for their high meat production, for their commercial value. And as homesteaders again too, we want high yield meat animals.
Yeah, and we encourage people to have a multi-faceted, layered system, however that looks for you and however you can. So just in the poultry world, if you're able to get at least a few, these meat birds to fill your freezer quick, and then
Yeah.
there's the heritage breeds. It's a complement. They're complementing each other. And even the flavor is different too.
Oh yeah, man, these different heritage breeds are very
Yeah.
flavorful. You can get it
It tastes like real chicken.
tastes like chicken.
The flavor.
Which reminds me, if you guys, so everybody goes to the chicken department at the grocery store, it's $1.99 a pound. I think it hasn't changed. Maybe it's a little more now. But they plump the chicken. They inject it with saline a lot of times. It's a common practice called plumping or enhancing. I've known about this for a while, and I don't eat store chicken. We raise our own chicken here. I'd rather not eat it, and there's a bunch of other reasons. But when you're buying a chicken at the store, the thing is filled with a little bit of water. So you're paying for this saline too. And, obviously they want to make a buck, and it increases the profit margin. If I'm selling 10 pounds of chicken versus 10 pounds of chicken and 1.5 pounds of water, you're paying for 1.5 pounds of water.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing to look up to. So what is it about the factory farms? So this is why a lot of homestead people, small farm people raising their own gardens, they're health conscious. They're aware that food's not healthy anymore.
Yeah, right.
Right? It's filled with preservatives, it's manipulated, it's contaminated,
And
it's
then all of
stripped
the
of nutrients.
the different health issues that can be associated to foods, with how the plants absorb chemicals and such, and so do the animals. Passes into their meat, into their eggs.
Unfortunately, but they, what does a big company care? If you lived in America, you should know by now that your well-being has zero meaning compared to the ability to profit off of you.
So you got to look out for yourself. Educate yourself. And
so I'm a strong advocate of understanding food, understanding some basic food nutrition, food sciences, and if you're eating poorly, if you're having chronic health issues, many of the chronic health issues we have are dietary. They're dietary and some behavioral stuff going on too, obviously. But these things can be modified, and it takes a little bit of education. Now, I'm not going to say terrible things about factory farms. I'm just going to read you some basic general facts that we're all aware of, or should be. The animal living conditions in the big factory farms are pretty horrid. You see them, like what, squished?
Yeah.
Little cages?
Yeah, they can't spread their wings. They really can't move around. They're just pecking for food.
It's not something I want to eat.
It's a prison.
So when you're squished together with a bunch of sick chickens, you get sick, and you need
antibiotics. And they're not exposed to the vitamin D from the sunlight, fresh air.
And I think they take up smoking while in there because they're depressed. So the chickens are smoking, they're taking antibiotics, they're not getting their sun, they're living in terrible, filthy conditions. And, they do have standards. I'm not bad-mouthing commercial facilities, but you are aware, they don't have the freedom that a pasture-raised bird has. And their food and their meat, it's not going to be as nutrient dense because they don't have access to the variety of nutrients that we find out in nature. Or, here's a plug. They don't have access to the nutrients that they find in a delicious bag of My Little Dinosaur chicken feed made here at the Dinosaur Omelet. Our proprietary blend of non-GMO and what do you call it? Probiotics for healthy chickens. But they don't feed the chickens at the commercial facilities stuff like this. Okay, the chickens at the chicken facilities are eating soy or corn, whatever is cheap and whatever is going to get them big and fat as quick as possible. And they're not their eggs. If you're eating eggs, they're not going to have the same nutrient content. There's a debate about it whether it's negligible or not, but the taste.
But if they're being treated with antibiotics or anything, that the bird, then some of that's going to go into their eggs.
And if you're a real stickler, they're usually eating GM products, genetically modified soy, genetically modified corn, obviously. So at a homestead condition, and home raised food, you're a lot more in control of what your chickens are consuming, and
Yeah.
thusly what you are consuming. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I rambling? Okay. Anything else interesting about the chicken heritage versus commercial that I should mention that people should be aware of? I don't think so. I think the main issue with it was goals.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Yeah, I mean, they're both very different as far as what they produce, how long they live, the type of housing coop structure you would have for a meat chicken versus a heritage breed that's, egg and or meat. But yeah.
Yeah, your heritage chickens, they do have a long line of, they have a history, and they've been kept for many centuries, some of these birds.
Both are very useful on the homestead or farm. But again, as Christopher mentioned, your goals that's the most important thing for you to figure out so that you're using your time, your resources, your money, your energy wisely, your space wisely. Yeah. And again, I mean, having that multi-layered system for yourself, your family, of different types of meats, different types like eggs, from different types of poultry, and your vegetables is ideal for your health.
Right. I think that'll wrap up a brief discussion about heritage breed versus commercial breed chickens, and nothing wrong with either or. Depends on your goal. I think, when we think commercial chicken, we think of the giant chicken facilities, and sometimes we may have what do you call it? We may be like an inherent thought like that's negative because it's in a big facility. But no. Commercial chickens are great for the application that they're meant for. They're not genetically modified like laboratory creatures. They're specifically bred for large meat production or very rapid egg production. They have shorter lifespans, but they have a high output. Okay, your heritage breeds have varied genetics. You can reproduce them. They live longer, and there's a bunch of positive things to them. But they do grow slower because they have a higher lifespan, and they're more natural animals. They're not selectively bred for those other purposes. They're bred for their form, like the phenotype, what they're going to look like, and whatever their purpose is. Eggs, meat, color,
their temperaments. Yeah.
So figure out what your goals are. Look for the chickens that'll satisfy them, and you'll certainly be happy. And I think, anything else?
I don't think so. I think
If you have any questions, stick them in the comment section. They pop up, and we get to them. Yeah. If you have any future ideas for videos, let me know. And next time it won't be vertical like this. This really makes me upset. Stupid in YouTube.
But thanks for stopping in, you guys, and I hope you have a good rest of your time.